Almost Twins by Mark Fielding Darden. Chapter 8, The Waiting Place, 2010. The head facilitator at the California Coastal Clinic in San Jose was working to wrap up business for the day. It was Friday afternoon and she was ready to go home. She was about to lock her door and head to the exit when she heard the alarm. Shaking her head in disbelief, she turned and threw her purse on the nearest chair. Moving to the phone on the wall, she quickly dialed the nurse's station on Georgie's hall. She knew it was him again. George Spaulding was now 60 years old and weighed about 280 pounds. His muscle tone had faded from his swimming days, and he lived to eat, sneak beers from the kitchen, and watch girly movies on the cable TV in his room. He used to keep his bedroom fairly neat, but that changed after he had a mild stroke about 10 years ago, just after he arrived at the clinic. All his meals were planned, and his life was completely paid for. Todd and Loretta Spaulding had made sure that their problem child was protected. They were good parents. Geoff would come to visit, but not very often. Geoff's visits during those years were pretty much limited to when Georgie really needed him. Ironically, both parents would die in 2002 of unrelated illnesses only a few days apart in a California hospital. Neither would know that the other was in the hospital dying. 85 years of life, 51 years of marriage. Georgie had obligingly settled into his new home, but once his parents died, he snapped back into life. He loved his parents. He knew where he came from. He knew they loved him. At the funeral, Georgie was on the front row and stood straight up when the minister asked for comments. Georgie's words were, "They loved me, and I loved them. You got that right." Geoff, on the other hand, said nothing that day. Georgie's brother came to see him about twice a year, or whenever Georgie wanted to see him. It was always the biggest thrill for Georgie. He would wait at the front window of the home and stare into the parking lot to catch a glimpse of his beloved brother as he arrived. Geoff was still strong, fit, and successful. Georgie was still limping, mentally lost, and now overweight. Though they were so different, they were still identical twins, and they still looked like twins. Since childhood, Geoff had known that except for the grace of God, he could have been Georgie. Georgie knew that except for the curse of God, he could have been Geoff. Whenever they saw each other on these occasions, both men would stare at each other for minutes at a time, with this silent realization passing between them. I could have been you. Each time Geoff came to visit Georgie, Georgie would make him drive them to the beach, where they would spend an hour or so walking in the sand. Georgie would talk and talk, but never complain, and Geoff would listen dutifully. Georgie always left a footprint on one side and a skid mark on the other. If Geoff left an impression, you couldn't see it. Then Georgie would return to the facility. Back at the clinic, the alarm was sounding, and the head facilitator was running down the hall, looking for Georgie. She found him in Mrs. Cranston's room with his shirt pulled out and a silly look on his face. Mrs. Cranston was hollering, and Georgie was grinning widely. He was off his meds again. How does he fool them so often, she wondered. Georgie laughed, "Ha ha!" and began to run to the other side of the bed. No one was really ever worried about Georgie. It was just a game he played that ended in hugging. He was always the gentleman. Still, they had to subdue him and take him to his room. He never fought them, but he complained the whole time. "Damn those nurses, always ruining my fun." Chapter 9, up next.